Hello, I'm glad you're here. My name's Joey, and we are doing in-depth Bible study. We are going to explore the Bible, hopefully in ways you've never seen before. We're going to start with the book of Acts. And occasionally I'm going to go to the Old Testament, and we're going to go back and forth. So starting today, we're going to go on an ongoing Bible study, an ongoing adventure with the book of Acts. Now, a little bit of background on me. Yeah, I am pretty proficient with the New Testament Greek, not so much with the Hebrew. So, whenever I'm doing my New Testament studies, I will frequently teach some Greek words, Greek grammar, and some Greek text tidbits. So, if you like Greek text, I'm your guy. So, look forward to that. And I am big on contextual information. Today's lesson, we're going to have some contextual stuff mainly. And whenever I do my Old Testament stuff, I'm not so much on the Hebrew. I know just enough to know that I don't know enough. So I won't be doing a whole lot of Hebrew word studies whenever I do my Old Testament, but maybe some. Maybe later on in the future, as I learn more Hebrew, maybe we'll do more. But Old Testament, not a lot of Hebrew. New Testament, pretty good amount of Greek. So we're going to go ahead and get started. Today, we're going to start our series on Acts. We're going to start with Acts chapter 1, verse 1. You may think, that's it? But there's a lot. There's a lot to cover. So let's go ahead and start. Here we go. Acts chapter 1, verse 1. The first account, O Theophilus, I composed about all that Jesus began to do and teach. The first account of what? So what is this first account? We're going to talk about that first. Then we're going to get to the old Theophilus. So two things. We're going to talk about three things. We're going to talk about what's the first account? And who's writing this? And who's this Theophilus guy? So first account is the book of Luke, the Gospel of Luke. So now you know the second part. Who's the writer? Luke. So let's go look at the first account. We're going to look at the beginning of Luke, chapter 1. We're going to look at verses 1 through 4. I know I'm kind of rambling, but I'm going to tie it together pretty soon. So, Acts chapter 1, verse 1 said, the first account, O Theophilus, I composed that all that Jesus began to do and teach. First account is the book, a Gospel of Luke, written by Luke. So it says, Luke chapter 1, verse 1, inasmuch as many have undertaken to compile on an account of things that have been fulfilled among us, just as those who from the beginning were eyewitnesses and servants of the word handed them down to us. It seemed fitting for me as well, having investigated everything carefully from the beginning, to write it out for you in orderly sequence. Most excellent Theophilus. Remember that. Most excellent Theophilus. That's key right there. So that you may know the certainty about the things you have been taught. So I call Luke the unsung hero of the New Testament. Of course, the hero of the Bible is Jesus. But I call Luke the unsung character. He's the one that really hadn't really talked about a lot. But Luke plays a great role. Luke's one of my favorite characters, apart from the Lord Jesus Christ. Luke's one of my favorite characters of the New Testament. And I wish there was a lot of books. There's not a lot of books out there about Luke. Hey, if you know a good book about Luke, let me know. I'd like to buy it. So, anyways, Luke wrote the Gospel of Luke and the book of Acts. And it's kind of like some people say it's one narrative, some people say it's two narratives, but he wrote it to a guy named Theophilus. Um, so here's what I think. It says down here in verse 3, most excellent Theophilus. And as you, let me look at this. When you read in the New Testament, in the Greek, when they say most excellent, it refers to somebody of importance, maybe a government official. You read in Acts chapter 24, um, where Paul is talking to Felix. I believe that's who it is. If I'm wrong, I'm sorry. He says, but uh, where he calls Felix your most excellent, and he talks to as Felix, who is the governor, the proconsul of the area of Judea. He calls Felix most excellent. So when you say most excellent Theophilus, it makes me think that Theophilus is some kind of Roman official, maybe a governor, maybe somebody in the Roman uh, government in Rome, or he could be a dignitary, somebody who represents Caesar. I think, here's what I think. I think Theophilus is a guy that's interested in about the stories of Jesus. And who are these people that follow Jesus? Who are these Christians? These believers, followers of the new faith, Jesus the Nazarene. They follow this guy, they believe this guy, they're even being killed for this guy. Who is this Jesus? What's his story? And who are these people going around spreading this story? Who are these apostles and these witnesses? Where did it all come from? I, Theophilus, would like to know this. Somehow he met up with a guy named Luke. And Luke was like, Your Excellent Theophilus, I'm going to compile the narrative and I'm going to give that to you. So he says here in Luke chapter 1, inasmuch as many have undertaken to compile an account of things that have been fulfilled among us. So he said, so a lot of people got together to compile their notes. They were sharing their notes, sharing their stories, sharing their testimony, sharing the witness, what they know and what they seen and what they witnessed and what they heard from somebody else. Say, for example, Mark. Mark wrote the Gospel of Mark from the firsthand information that he was given by Peter. So he said, just as those who from the beginning were eyewitnesses, Peter, John, James, Matthew, Thomas, all those guys, the James, the brother, half brother Jesus, Jude, the half brother Jesus, all these guys were the eyewitnesses. They walked with Jesus. They talked with Jesus. They saw him do miracles. They saw him get crucified. And servants of the word, they handed them down to us. So Luke and his fellow team that compile these narratives, they got with the apostles. They got with John. They got with Peter. They got with Matthew. They got with all the whoever they were able to get with. And they got their notes. They got their witness. They got their ideas. And of course, as we're going to find out, Luke was a traveling companion of Paul. So him and Paul were very close. They were friends, companions, and brothers in Christ. So a lot of what Luke knows, especially in the book of Acts, is first firsthand information from the Apostle Paul directly. So it seemed fitting for me, Luke, as well. So after Luke got all this information from the apostles, from Paul, from James, from John, from Peter, so you get what I'm saying? You following me? Luke did his research. Luke played the investigator. I want to find out about this Jesus Christ because I've been following this Paul guy everywhere, and I know what he knows. I want to probably while he was traveling with Paul before Paul was killed, the in between times he would get with the apostles. Tell me more about this Jesus. Tell me more about this. Tell me about when y'all did miracles. Tell me about the feeding of the 5,000. Tell me about the crucifixion. Tell me about the birth story. Tell me all this stuff. So Luke was compiling all this stuff. And he said, having investigated everything carefully, I'm sure there's probably some false stories. There's probably some inaccuracy. Well, Peter said one thing, and this other guy said something else. Barnabas said one thing, and somebody else said another thing. So I got to piece this all together. So Luke was carefully investigating these things. He had writings, manuscripts. He had everything just piled out. Just you ever did a research paper? You did a brainstorming. You had your stuff piled out, and you're sorting through it, and you're narrowing it down. You're brainstorming, and you're taking stuff out and adding stuff to it. Luke was carefully investigating um, from the beginning to write it out for you in orderly sequence. So he narrowed it down and he put it in an orderly sequence. And it starts with Luke chapter 1, talking about the birth of Jesus, how it all came together. And he talks about the life of Jesus, all up to the death of Jesus. For most excellent Theophilus. A lot of speculation on who this is. I'm just going to say up front, I believe Theophilus was most likely a Roman dignitary, could have been a politician, could have been a governor, or he could have been maybe a Roman soldier. He could have been a high-ranking centurion or somebody in charge of the Roman soldiers. Uh, so, back to Acts chapter 1, where we were before. The first account of Theophilus. Um, I compose about all that Jesus began to do and teach. So, we talked about Theophilus a little bit. So, who is Luke? So, we know Luke wrote this, and he got all his information from probably the apostles, those who were eyewitnesses. It could have been some of the women. It could have been Mary, or it could have been Martha. It could have been some of the women, which he mentions in his writings. So, who is this Luke guy? Well, Luke was a Greek. Um, Eusebius and both Jerome in their writings identify him as being from Antioch. The Bible doesn't specify that. As a matter of fact, the only thing the Bible says about Luke is that Luke joined Paul's team in Troas, and I'll get to that in a minute. Um, but the early Christian history writers, Eusebius and Jerome, identify Luke as being a citizen of Antioch. And I think that fits because I believe long before, it's possible, it's just me, it's not in the Bible, but I believe long before Luke joined Paul's team, he could have already become a Christian long before that in Antioch. Because Paul, Barnabas, Silas, they all spent a lot of time in Antioch. And if Luke was a resident there, he could have become a believer by Paul and Barnabas preaching and teachings about Jesus in Antioch. So Luke begins traveling with Paul from Troas, and we see that in Acts chapter 16, verses 8 through 13. Let me read that. Said it, and this is talking about Paul just received that Macedonian vision. A man, in a vision told him, "Hey, come and help us in Macedonia." So, verse 8, passing by Mysia, they came down to Troas. A vision appeared to Paul in the night. A man of Macedonia was standing and appealing to him, to Paul, saying, "Come over to Macedonia and help us." When he had seen the vision, immediately we sought to go into Macedonia. So what? So the we, if you all you people that know grammar, if you know English, you know we is first person plural pronoun. So up until this point, for the first 16 chapters of Acts, it's always they and them, he or him or her, she or her. It was never I, me, or we until now. So that signifies to me that here in Acts chapter 16, verse 8, uh, verse 10, we sought to go into Macedonia, concluding that God had called us. Luke's Luke's being he's being identified as the ones being called to preach the gospel to them in Macedonia. So we see here in Acts chapter 16, verses 8 through 13, I'll finish that in a minute, that Luke joins the missionary team of Paul, and I believe it was Paul and Silas, yes. So let's keep going. So putting out to sea from Troas, Luke's in there. We means I, Luke, writing this with Paul and Silas and the team. I think Timothy was there too. We ran straight, of course, to Samothrace, and on that day, following to Neapolis, and from there to Philippi, which is the leading city of the district of Macedonia, a Roman colony. And Luke, went to Philippi with them, went outside the gate to a riverside where we were supposing that there would be a place of prayer, and we sat down and began speaking to the women who had assembled. So Luke met up with Paul in Troas. I believe, just my theory, it ain't me, but since Eusebius said that Luke was a resident of Antioch, he probably already knew Paul. He may have already had plans to meet him there. It wasn't just like, "Hey, look, uh, it's that Paul guy. Paul, I'm Luke. We just met in Troas." I don't know if this is a fact, but it probably is the case that Luke and Paul may have known each other. I'm just going to say may. So you can't say, "Well, we don't know if that's true or not." I can't trust this guy saying that Luke knew Paul before. He may have known Paul because Paul and Barnabas and Silas spent a lot of time in Antioch. So I think it's possible that when Paul and Silas left for this mission journey to Antioch, that Luke may have left later and met them in Troas. It may have been by design. Luke, hey, we're going to go ahead and go. Me and Silas, we're going to go ahead and go. You just meet us later. The Bible didn't say it. It's not really important. Luke didn't think it was important, but he did think it was important to say, I'm there now. We're going to Macedonia. And we stopped at Philippi. And we went to a place of prayer where women were gathering. And we met Lydia. So that's Luke. So Luke was there with Paul on his mission trip. So Luke first joined the team in Acts chapter 16. And as you read from here on out through the end of Acts, it'll say we and them and we and them. So Luke's there and then he's gone, and Luke's there and then he's gone. So he's in and off of the mission. So as we read through Acts, notice the we's and the thems and the they. So you notice Luke's there, Luke's not there. So I think that's pretty significant. A lot of people don't teach that, and a lot of people don't point that out. I think it's pretty significant that you know that. So Luke was a physician. In Colossians chapter 4, verse 14, where Paul is sending his greetings, he says, Luke, the beloved physicians, greet you. So Luke, we know that Paul knew him as a physician, a medical doctor. And Luke was a very, very close companion of Paul. There's a movie out called The Apostle Paul or Paul the Apostle, I can't remember, but it's got that Jim Caviezel plays the Luke guy. And it's really the main character of the movie is Luke. You can look it up on Amazon or whatever streaming app. You can buy a DVD if you like DVDs. I think it's Paul the Apostle or the Apostle Paul. And it stars Jim Caviezel as Luke. Great movie. I recommend you buy that. But Luke was there until the end. And in that movie, it talks about Luke making a relationship with the guards and the leader of the prison, maybe the governor, whoever he was. So they trusted him. They allowed him to come and go and talk to Paul. And that's not in the Bible either, but it makes good dramatics. So Luke would go down into the prison and talk to Paul, and he would get his pencil and his paper, and he would be writing down stuff. He would be documenting whatever Paul says. So they kind of dramatize like Luke's listening to Paul and he's writing it down. I thought that was pretty cool. So as Paul's nearing his death, he writes to Timothy. He's telling Timothy, I'm here in this lonely dungeon. I say, he's under the jail. He's in that dank, damp, dark, nasty dungeon. And he's facing death. He knows that his time is near and he doesn't have a long time to go. So he's trying to make the best of his life. He says to Timothy, he's telling Timothy in 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 9, make every effort to come to me soon. That's why he's telling Timothy, come visit me, Timothy. I'm longing for some company. He says, for Demas, having loved this present world, has deserted me and gone to Thessalonica. Crescens has gone to Galatia, and Titus to Dalmatia. Now, Demas deserted him, it looks like, because he loved the present world. Now, Titus going to Dalmatia is not necessarily a bad thing, because Paul writes to Titus and it never indicates that he had any ill feelings toward Titus when he wrote the letter to Titus. Titus most likely went to Dalmatia on a evangelistic trip. And he says here in verse 11, this is one of my favorite verses. I read this and go, only Luke is with me. Only Luke. Luke was there until the end. Luke was Paul's friend until the bitter end. I thought that was always pretty significant. So we're coming into almost 20 minutes here, and I told you we're going to do verse 1. Next time, we're going to start with verse 2 and probably, hopefully make it down to verse 5, Acts chapter 1. We will pick this up. We will start going a little bit faster, but we're going to, just like I did today, we're going to refer back to Luke. We're going to do that a couple of times, and then we're going to get to a point where we just close the book on Luke. But as we read Acts chapter 1, verses 2 through 4 and 5, we're going to have to go back to the end of Luke chapter 24, and we're going to make reference because there's a lot of tie-ins. The end of chapter 24 of Luke ties in to Acts chapter 1. So I hope you like this. Comment, like, and please let me know if you have any questions, or just let me know what you think. And we're going to keep doing this. So thank you for watching, and hope to see you next time.